Right. Well, thank you, Jim, and thank you, Bessie, and welcome, colleagues. Thank you for sticking around. I don't know about you, but today is a record day for me. I've now been on Zoom for 11 hours, almost straight. But Bessie, this was by far the most fun I've had all day. So thank you, Bessie, for organizing this, and thank you to our fellow gamers. My name is Karen Newman, and I am an associate professor of English at the University of Indianapolis in Indiana. And I've been a member of TESOL and my affiliate, Indiana TESOL, for over 20 years, serving in various leadership roles. And I think the best thing that I have gotten out of all of my years has been friendships, collegiality, and learning. And in that spirit tonight, we're going to continue with some really great learning if you're able to stay with us. So in the spirit of learning, professional support, I am really excited to moderate our next session. And just some brief pointers. You're welcome to keep your cameras on or off as you please. If you have some questions for our presenters, we'll ask that you go ahead and type those in the chat box and I'll be monitoring them. We'll save a little bit of time at the very end of the presentation to address your questions. And let me go ahead and introduce our next presenters. Our speakers are going to be Luciana Diniz, Nanci Leiton. I hope I pronounced your name right, Nanci. And also Eric Dodson. The title of their presentation is going to continue the theme of open educational resources, namely exploring open educational resources with the Green Tea Open Educational Resources Group. Our presenters are going to talk a little bit more about their process and their experience with developing open educational resources. So presenters, if you could possibly briefly introduce yourselves for about 30 seconds or less, tell us where you are, tell us what you teach, and then go ahead and you'll have about 40 minutes for your session. And I'll be giving you some indications as we get close to time.
Okay, should I start? So hi, thanks for having us. My name is Luciana Diniz. I teach at Portland Community College. I've been teaching there for about 14 years. Some years ago, I was president at OER TESOL, and I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
My name is Nanci Leiton. I also teach at Portland Community College. I've been there for about 15 years, and I've been working with this great group of folks on this project for communication classes.
All right, and hi everyone. I'm Eric Dodson, and I also teach at Portland Community College here in sunny Portland, Oregon. We just had dinner. So cheers to all of you who are hanging on later on. I've taught at PCC for about 5 years, also a past president and board member of OER TESOL. And yeah, excited that you're all here. And I think without any further ado, this is kind of our plan for our presentation on our OER project. We're going to talk about what we made, how we use it, and what we've learned about creating OER, or kind of our reflections on it. And already in chat, if you'd like to share, we're not going to be able to catch everything probably, but if you want to share like your basic experience level with open educational resources, if you feel comfortable, labeling yourself as a beginner or a novice or just starting, if you've adopted it in your own teaching or made changes, or even if you've created something. And then our project is called Green Tea, and you can see us there on the right at the Behind the Museum Coffee House in Portland, Oregon. If you visit, you got to go there. It's a great, Japanese style cafe, and the inspiration for the name of this project. As people are chatting, we'll try to keep an eye on those messages, and if there's questions or comments, weave those in. Otherwise, we'd love to keep the conversation going We're going to share in the chat a link to this presentation, a link to our OER, you'll see in a minute. And otherwise, I want to thank you for being here and thank Shadia Mansour for connecting with us and, either bringing OER to TESOL or maybe TESOL to OER more and more. It's just such crucial work. And thanks for the introduction by Karen, and special thanks to Lynn and James and all the organizers of this event, because doing it online does not make anything easier. And like the story of the last year, right? Cool. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about our OER that we created, which is called Green Tea. It's a communication OER for like a low to mid intermediate level English program, communication classes. And it's a set of materials, really, is what we've focused on, especially multimedia materials for our classes. And the focus on this OER was creating, listenings and dialogues and activities for students to do that will really engage with what we know about our learners' interests and their goals. So doing that, but still having, real world language and chances for them to connect all of the new information to their experience while still getting a lot of language support, having it be accessible, plenty of opportunities for learning and uptake. And we're going to kind of look at this step by step, but in general, this OER, the goal was to have like a mix of lots of different approaches, very eclectic, from communicative activities for students to do to focusing on meaning and almost like a content focused or content based instruction light, and then a little bit of focus on form, also pronunciation. So I can share this, or maybe Nanci or Luciana could share the link to our document, but I'm going to follow it here and do a short tour of Green Tea OER. Zip back to the beginning. So our OER is mostly based in this Google Doc, or that's where everything can be found. And that means you can see things as a series of links, but it also works to download it or find the Google Drive files. Thanks, Luciana. So here you can see the different units that we have. And these were created basically from the ground up, a lot of them by Luciana from I think several years of teaching, and going to free or YouTube-based resources to not require a textbook for this class. PCC, our learners are a mix and really come from diverse backgrounds. We have folks who start with survival skills, folks who are newcomers, and work their way up. Some people have lived here for a long time and are just coming to gain a little bit of confidence with English for their work or their life. And then we have folks who are moving up to get a degree or certificate. So this class is right in the confluence of all of those. But these topics here, there's a lot that connects with people's lives. So I'm going to take a tour. And again, if there's questions or anything you need in the chat, yeah. So there's a link in the chat to the document that Luciana shared. So in the document, we have materials more or less in order, starting with some pre-listening. I think this isn't in a slide form right now, but this questions that raise awareness or introduce vocabulary, get students starting to think about what they know about a topic or connecting to their experience. And then vocabulary connected, we have Quizlet lists to start introducing. We have interactive exercises for students to, to try to fill in the blank or otherwise find meanings of words in context. And then we have lecture videos. These are created by ourselves, but also other teachers in our program. These are short, informative lectures, about 5 or 6, I think maybe one is 7 minutes long. And they're on the topic, and they kind of serve as an introduction to the topic. Sometimes they go into the history, sometimes they're going into comparisons or common misconceptions about the idea. And they're not just simple treatments. These are based on sources and other existing YouTube videos. But what makes this different from a YouTube video is that we're also sharing transcripts and the ability to download the videos without captions or with captions. All of these things where others can really take control over what they want to use or what they want to edit. We also have follow-up dialogues on the topics. So these are, I think all of the dialogues are scripted or semi-scripted. And then activities that can be, shared in a learning management system, embedded, or even shared by, email or in a document that the students use. We have a pronunciation packet, which, it's our our learners' first languages and known languages are really varied. So we have to kind of have a pretty wide spread of pronunciation activities. And then we have links to other videos, and some of these are on YouTube or from other sites that we don't necessarily have ownership of in the same way. All the other videos and activities and handouts, those are the ones that we've created are licensed under Creative Commons. So those are CC by attribution. There we go. We also have ideas for speaking activities, scaffolding prepared speeches, which is part of this class at PCC and important for a lot of intermediate communication classes. Some extension activities and lots of links to other worksheets, things that could be printed out or in the past year and month shared online, integrated into an LMS. And that goes for assessments too. We'll have sometimes video presentations or lectures or short talks or conversations with quiz questions that are summative assessments of those units. So that's my whirlwind tour. And I think that gets to some of the basic materials that we have in this OER. Next up, I think it's best to kick it over to, I think this is Nanci's portion. Is that right, Nanci?
Yeah. So a big part of the way I use this OER in my classes is by encouraging students to gain control of their own learning. So it encourages learner autonomy by having them work together in groups. And this is beyond just breakout groups during synchronous meetings. This is where students set up their own Zoom rooms or other rooms where they can speak and listen and practice their communication skills. And then they get some guided activities from me, but they are doing all of the communication themselves. So here's what some of the students have to say about these group meetings. We share ideas as a group, we work together and help each other. And although learning activities are not easy to me, we solve the problem together. I like group meetings because we can practice the lessons in group, and this helps to improve the pronunciation. technology skills, and is better to complete tasks. I like them. We work together. Some people read it, someone corrects it, someone records it. It's like a game. So these group meetings that happen outside of my planned lesson are something that the students have control of, and they gain a lot from those. Eric, are you moving the slides forward then? Okay. So this is what they would see as an assignment. The instructions are step by step. They run through here, and then I'm just providing a guided worksheet for them. And if you want to click on the example, Eric, then we can take a quick look at what that would look like. It's the link in the, yeah. Oh, link in the middle there. Yeah. So I'm not in this meeting with them at all. We've already, introduced vocabulary. We've talked about the topic. This is up to them. It's really autonomous learning. And they're setting up the meeting themselves, determining their roles in the meeting. And then I usually give them some kind of video to kind of prompt discussion. Some of these videos might look familiar to you. Some of them have made the rounds, but usually I try to get them to engage somehow. And then there's some discussion questions to follow. So this is like your, a standard lesson where you're giving prompts and then letting the students talk about it. But I'm not in the meeting at all. And that's the biggest difference. So that's just one example of how an extension that takes you outside of that. The next example I'm going to talk about is yet another extension, but this is related to the food and nutrition topic. And this is an extension that just continues to spiral that vocabulary. And the feedback we're getting from students is we love how that vocabulary just continues through the units. So what's introduced at the beginning, just we continue to use it throughout the rest of the OER. And this particular activity builds that vocabulary and critical thinking, but scaffolds discussion through informed consumerism, truth in advertising, nutrition labels, sort of the next step besides just what's for dinner. And I think this is Luciana's topic.
Okay, it's me. So building on what Nanci just mentioned, yeah, the students really like the vocabulary part of the book, and I do too. So we've selected high frequency and academic words to focus on, and students have multiple opportunities to be exposed to that vocabulary in different contexts. I'm going to just show you some other examples building on what Nanci just mentioned. So for example, the chapter on empathy, there are lots of adjectives that are introduced. For example, frustrated, overwhelmed, understanding, like lots of different adjectives. And there are lots of different ways to work with these adjectives throughout the unit. So for example, on pre and post listening discussions, listening passages, pronunciation, pictures, speeches. Let me show you some examples. Eric, if you can go to the next slide. For example, before they listen to a lecture, then the situation in which, for example, imagine that you had a Zoom meeting, a Zoom class, but you just found out that there was a problem with your internet connection. That has happened to most of us, I guess, this year. And describe how you would feel first, second, and third, and explain why. So then they would have to say, oh, first, I would be angry, and then explain why, and then I would be frustrated, and then I would remember that I had a quiz in that class, and then I would be desperate. So they would be using the vocabulary before they listen to the lecture, and then they listen to the lecture, they will be exposed to the vocabulary again. And then Eric, if you go to the next slide, here is a different approach to listening to the lecture. So after they discuss the content of the lecture, then they could listen to the lecture one more time, and this time focus on the vocabulary. So at the beginning of the lecture, the speaker says that the words embarrassed, upset, angry, and frustrated. Why? So they would be listening and paying attention to vocabulary. And then the next slide has a different example of vocabulary as well. This one is pronunciation. So now they're looking at the same words, and now let's look at pronunciation. Many of these words have multiple syllables and they're difficult to pronounce. So they would have to find out how many syllables, which one is stressed. And then, Eric, if you go to the next one, then after a discussion that you could find pictures online and then say how does this person feel and why, and then connected to the empathy topic, which is the topic of the lecture. If you were her friend, what would you tell her to show that you feel empathy? So they would be using all the adjectives that they learned in this lesson. And then I have one final one, I believe. The next slide. Oh, no, there's one before. Yeah, there. They can also prepare speeches, focusing on the vocabulary as well. So here is a homework assignment that I had for them. Prepare a 2-minute speech to present to your group next class. And then the topics would contain like, what are 2 things people can do when they feel overwhelmed? 2 ways to show our friends that we are understanding. So recycling the vocabulary over and over again. And these words are also going to show up in the language and memory chapter, and also the introverts and extroverts. So they are always looking at the same words, and towards the end of the term, they're actually using the words when they speak. So that is my favorite part. So I wanted to share that with you.
That's great. Thanks, Luciana. And again, if there are questions or things you want us to go back to, it's just us and you, and we're here together. So just let us know in chat. And maybe you get the feeling of why we started this project. For me, it was because Luciana and Nanci are the people who you want to ask and say, hey, did you teach this class last term? Or did you have any materials? Or did you have anything that was really useful? I think of this OER as our way of saying, it's not the old tech or old tech of, here's the stack of transparencies that we used, right? And it's not just the photocopies of documents that we used that worked well for a class. Here's, the digital version of everything. So one example of how I like to connect different activities that we've created is on the topic of introverts and extroverts. And you can see, I always point out our very intelligent presenter here. But after we've done some activities, listening and kind of understanding the organization of this talk about introverts and extroverts, in the world of remote online teaching, Quizlet still is a great resource. So I have my students practicing vocabulary, getting into it. We also have a set of short listenings we've created that are based on news stories that are from Oregon. So that's also kind of building off of another coworker's OER project. So he's written these stories, and you can follow the links. If you get the link to this slide deck, you can follow all of these images have links to these resources. So we listened to this short story about this worker at a local gardening center, and then talk about, well, do you think he's more of an introvert or an extrovert? Why do you think so? Oops, managed to click on it there. And again, I did it. Cool. And then integrating pronunciation. I have this short paragraph that is connected to things that we've talked about in class about, the sh sound and other sounds that, especially, it depends on the learner's background. If they're a Spanish speaker, misconception isn't going to necessarily be an issue, but For learners from Southeast Asia, that can be a really tricky one. So I have them work with these online tools to record themselves, listen to themselves back, and then all the while connecting it. What do you think about your own experience? You know, we're talking about it, thinking about a time when you felt more like an introvert or an extrovert. And I usually do this unit first, and it all kind of leads up to, oops, I'm opening links left and right. It leads up to the first prepared speech in my class, which is really just about a 2-minute speech to answer what's your name, a situation in your life when you're an extrovert, one situation in your life where you're more of an introvert, and then a quick conclusion. We've done that with looking at other people's lives. I share my own examples, and then I have students do this in groups, and sometimes just meeting in a breakout room in Zoom, doing some accountability activities to share and take notes with the other students' presentations. But this kind of scaffolding of topics, language, going from receptive to productive, this is built into the whole OER.
So just,
Luciana, did you want to?
Is it okay? All right. So
yeah.
The next part of our presentation is just to tell you a little bit of the story behind Green Tea, behind our OER. So this is how it started. So I was teaching Communication 5, this class at PCC, and for some reason I was always assigned that class. I was teaching it almost every term, and the communication textbooks were very, very expensive. So for our students, it was very difficult for them to afford the textbooks. So then I decided to try and find some YouTube videos and other kinds of listening passages that I could use. So then my students didn't have to buy a textbook. So I experimented with lots of different types of topics. I was trying to find engaging topics, YouTube videos, TED Talks, like things like that. And I found lots of topics that my students responded really well to, for example, superstitions and empathy, and some other ones that they didn't. For example, I thought one of the topics was refugees, and I thought, oh, this is going to be a great topic. People can learn a lot about this. And then I found out that a lot of my students didn't want to talk about it. It was a part of their life that they did not really want to talk about. So I've learned a lot from that process. And then I had some topics that I thought worked really well, and some YouTube videos. However, the YouTube videos were sometimes too fast for them, or the vocabulary was not really what I wanted to emphasize. So then I thought, oh, maybe I should have create my materials. And then that's when the conversation started. And then it comes to the second piece that Nanci will describe.
Yeah, so like Luciana said, cost is a tough thing for many students. But what I was noticing about the books I was using was that a lot of times the information seemed out of date, or it was irrelevant to my students who are adult learners, and they were talking about college kids, and those things didn't make a lot of sense to my students. And then also the book was unwieldy. Like Luciana said, we might not use the whole book. It's an expensive book, and we would use half the book. So with my own content, it was easier to adapt it right at that moment to what the students needed or wanted, or current events. I could customize it to my own campus, things that were available to them. Of course, it was low to no cost, things that I could just give them a link to. And then it was really accessible. So that led to me developing a full unit that was an OER, and it was inclusive of my adult learners. I got rid of those disposable assignments. I could address digital literacy for them, and the topics were interesting with contemporary vocabulary. And their learning just kind of took off because it was something they were interested in and could use.
Thanks, Nanci. Yeah, I was getting carried away in chat, just saying, yeah, really we can get started also on day one with these because everyone has access to them, you know, as long as they have access to, these days, to the internet, which is not always given, all of the challenges of the last year. And I think we could give a whole another presentation on those challenges, but it has been great to have these resources. And I know all three of us have gotten to teach this class during this remote online time. And that's been, you know, a huge benefit. But I wanted to talk about the resources that made this possible. And on the left, we have Open Oregon Educational Resources, which is a government funded at the state level department, small office, but a whole grant system. I didn't look up the statistic about all of the grants, but it's been millions of dollars of grants, I believe, to support open education in the state, in higher ed specifically. So we were able to get grants for creating materials. I think it was $6,000 a pop for this 2-year project. We just started, I looked this up and I don't think Luciana or Nanci will believe me, but this started in 2019. I was like, oh no, it must have been like a long time ago, but different era. So it is a long time ago. So that funding is what made this work possible. A lot of this has gone on in parallel with our teaching, and a lot of OER projects work that way. There's a lot of great materials by folks who said, you know, I use this for my class, I'm putting it out there. And what we hope we've done is shared a little bit more or shown some of the connective pieces or provided for a lot of different approaches. And then also Portland Community College, our institution has been supportive. We received additional funding to pay for, you know, part-time faculty to record additional lectures. And then our Oregon affiliate has been, I think, a resource because we've had just a tremendous number of folks in Oregon, and I can give Washington and British Columbia credit too, but creating open educational resources or learning about them. And that's sometimes, you know, in affiliate conferences, sometimes it's working groups or people sharing resources when they know that they're interested in the same thing. So that kind of community of practice of OER has been really important for this work. Yeah, those are the resources I could think of that were really, really helpful. Yeah, great question about how our institution responded to this. And yeah, they've been really supportive. It's, especially in the last year, it's been very easy to say, oh no, we're not using a textbook for a class, and you know, no one blinks twice. Another question, is this available only for refugees or all students? It's available for everyone. So for our classes, we have, you know, a mix of immigrants, refugees, international students in our class. And this is the material that we use for our class. But then sharing it out widely, you know, if you have the link to it, you now have everything you need. Yeah, like Nanci says, to use it in your class tomorrow. Yeah, Luciana, Nanci, did you guys have anything you wanted to add there?
Just thanks for letting us share this information. It's been a pleasure to develop over the past couple of years. I've probably taught this class now 8 times with the materials, and it just, in my opinion, gets better and better. So if you can benefit from, you know, all of the times that we've cycled that material and taken it a step up, we're very happy to share it with you.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll continue teaching it. So then we'll always include more activities as we develop them. So it's always that's a nice thing about having an OER that is open. It's not like a book that it's done, right? So we keep adding to it.
Yeah, and kind of in that spirit, one of the ways that I got started actually creating OER was in a project where I learned different aspects of, considering licensing, considering accessibility. Accessibility, especially for online materials, is such a huge and important part of this work. Making sure that resources are available for people in different situations. But also, part of what I learned was a workflow of saying, you don't have to make a textbook. You could, every week of your class, be adding or making one thing. And, you're already doing a lot as a teacher, but if you're continually saying, okay, this is going to be one piece of something, and I'm going to share that out to keep myself accountable, over time, that adds up to a lot. Yeah. So Shadia, your question was about research and the students' perception of of this OER versus a textbook or traditional materials. Is that the?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great opportunity for action research, right?
Yeah.
Now that you created that, you used it for a few times, and in the future,
Yeah.
Think about doing research and publishing.
Yeah.
To go with this, OER and provide quality. This is quality definitely, but you need to back it up with data from your own action research classroom. Maybe publish something about it.
No, that suggestion is well taken, and I don't have the citations at my fingertips, but in open education in general, there's pretty stable, robust findings that in general, open educational resources are no worse than textbooks in higher education. So it's like oh yes, we're no worse, but sometimes better, right? And I think there's this whole world of the qualitative responses. If a student, when was the last time a student came to you and said, this textbook, the editor of this textbook, man, they just they had the magic in their fingertips. It's pretty rare, but learners do respond well to knowing that you've done the work to have resources that are relevant for them. Yeah, and with that, we're probably just about at time. Karen, is that right?
Yes, perfect timing. Thank you so much, Nanci, Luciana, Eric. I've really been enjoying learning about open access resources. This has been new to me, so big hand for our presenters. Thank you kindly.